Welcome to the Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Scott Clark.
And I'm Dave Dale. Today we have Councillor Mark King, Chairman of DSSAB. The genesis of this podcast is to discuss the consultant's report that came in that suggested a community hub within 3 blocks of the downtown area to make things more efficient and whatnot. And it kind of conflicts with the already taken action from DSSAB to organize with the low barrier shelter and the transitionary housing at the Northern Pines, all in the place up by Chippewa. Caused a little bit of problems up there at the beginning. But Mark, you're not in favor of the consultant's recommendation. What's going on here?
So I guess, Dave, I've been around for a while, and I've watched this, the circumstance develop. And
old as dirt, some people say. Old as dirt.
Yeah. So, I was actually thinking about this last night, the podcast and the fact that we were going to discuss this issue. And a lot of things came to mind. Obviously, the public remember Hope's Kitchen, correct? And that situation...
Hang on, Hope's Kitchen was where?
Was in 2 locations, actually, directly across from the Ted Thompson building, Kitty Corner.
Yeah.
At one point. And at another point, it was on Castle Street.
Okay.
And that was privately operated. Those individuals are no longer here in the city. And the situation that was created by that circumstance for the business community was huge. And, I try to be proactive and I'm available and, the problems associated with actually new people that arrived in the city that had set up businesses on Castle Street and the problems that they faced trying to deal with theft in their back parking lot, the fact that clientele were did not want to enter that particular building, and these people had actually started a new business. And you know what? I'm in small business, so we as small business owners really understand the importance of your clientele. And if you can't support your clientele and your clientele feels frightened to come into your business, obviously you're not going to have a business. And that particular experience and watching the impact of that location actually directly across from the Ted Thompson building. And I spent time there watching it because I was trying to understand what was happening in our community and why these circumstances had developed like that. And it became very, very obvious to me that if we want a vibrant working business community, which is centralized in our downtown core, we had better protect them, period. There is no buts. We've got to be able to protect them so that they're capable of carrying on normal business. And I have a letter right here from the DIA, which basically explains that circumstance. So to your point, Dave, and I can go on about the YMCA during the pandemic when we set that up and what that created to that particular community. I can go on about the double rinks episode and how that impacted the residents in that particular area. I was all subject to that during that process. So there was an interesting conversation going on during the intermission between the first and second period of the Edmonton game last night. And they were talking about a hockey game and the need to learn from your experiences. So the importance of learning from your experiences can't be underestimated. And I've learned some valuable lessons about how that creates circumstance. And, City of North Bay is my home. I grew up here. I have a house here. My kids grew up here. The importance of the city and the downtown core cannot be underestimated. So when I saw that report, I'll be honest with you, I was tremendously disappointed. I dealt with the warming center on Fraser Street during the winter, and I almost felt like I was alone on that circumstance, because it was not unusual to have an individual business owner call me Monday morning and almost crying on my shoulder, saying, "Mark, you have no idea what went on this street on Saturday. Locked doors, security cameras, just a heck of a situation where the drug trade was happening directly on Fraser Street in front of the warming center."
Mark, I have a question about, it's interesting what you're saying. So you're the chair of DSSAB, but what I'm hearing is that you're advocating more, and don't get me wrong, I'm a small business owner on a street, and I've had burglaries here and like everybody else up and down the street, and nobody cares about the cameras or alarm systems or anything. But it's interesting, what I'm hearing is you're advocating for the business community when I don't hear you in this conversation advocating for the people on the street.
Well, I've already done that, Scott. Quite frankly, I probably spent in excess of 3 years making that Northern Pines development work. Substantial time at the provincial level, out of town, in meetings at AMO, NOSDA. I'm vice chair of NOSDA. I was in Thunder Bay. I took part of my summer in Thunder Bay last year to talk to not only other individuals throughout Northern Ontario, but to try and lobby governments to understand what's happening on the streets of these communities.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you're not working, because I do. Yeah. I'm see you at the same conferences, so I know you're there. It was more the language you were using at the beginning of this, and what I've seen in my time working with social services and what's happening. There's a transformation going on now. There's challenges that social services has, and there's also silos that have been built over time, and they're not designed to integrate and work with one another. What I learned in the last conference I attended with an economist rather, and I would think you're conservative at heart. You're a small business guy. I don't know, but I think you are, because you ran for leadership. What came out of those meetings? If you hospitalize someone, it's $30,000 a month. If you incarcerate that person, it costs the taxpayers $15,000 a month. If you put them into a transitional home, whatever it happens to be, it's anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 a month. Yet today, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, currently you're giving less than $400 a month. It might be less than $300 for housing support for people who need housing. That seems insane to me. So a guy who sits at the table, you're at the pointy edge of the spear, you know the economics of all this. It doesn't make any sense. How can it be solved when it's not being funded properly? And on the other side, we as taxpayers are paying stupid amounts of money. I'll call them, they're $1 million people on the street, right? The cost of services and from policing and hospitals, and they're $1 million individuals. Give them a house. It's cheaper. I'll stop there. Tell me why that's so difficult in what you do, like in the DSSAB level.
So I would ask you a question back,
please.
Scott. Quite frankly, given the inflationary trends that are ongoing inside the housing industry, and if you had access to $1 million today, how would you invest that? Would you invest it in the housing industry right now? I wouldn't. I wouldn't take a chance on it. The inflationary costs that are driving building right now are out of sight, where you're looking at, maybe $700,000 or $700 a square foot. Put that into perspective. 1,000 square foot home, $700,000. How do you do that? We were incredibly lucky to be able to put Northern Pines together the way it came together. Providing, transitional housing. The problem is there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to go. There are some developments going on. The hospital's taken some of it. Canada College has taken. I just toured a site yesterday. 30 units in the old health unit building that's being built right now. Excess of 30 units for students that are going to Canada College. That's a good thing happening in the community that will take some of the pressure off the housing industry. But the problem is no one wants to invest. And I sat at AMO and watched the Premier talk about, driving the building industry and what government was going to do. Government does not build. People build, and people that are prepared to take a chance. And we don't have those people. And I don't blame them one bit, because when you look at the economics of it makes no sense.
But wait a second. Let me arm wrestle you on that a little bit. I would invest in real estate all day long, even with the high interest rates, even with everything that's going on. How I would do it would probably be more creative, as opposed to I'm just going to buy plots of land and get someone to build stuff. That's very different, because I think that's what you're saying.
That's exactly what yeah.
But I would, and I'll say there's one specific builder in town, Jimmy Colios.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Who has been, I think, really innovative. But he's also worked closely with DSSAB to start taking older schools, converting them into apartments. I think Northern Pines. Is that
absolutely.
Northern Pines?
Yeah.
So, and he's probably doing the old.
He's doing that one.
Okay. So Jimmy's no dummy. So don't tell me that's not profitable. That's profitable all day long if Jimmy Colios is involved in it. Come on, Mark.
Well, I've got to be honest with you. I don't know how he does it.
I don't know either. But
how he balances what's going on there from a financial standpoint, very, very difficult. But he got into a niche. There was no question. Mm-hmm. Those schools were there. They had good bones, the ability to rebuild them and have a crew that's capable of doing that.
But there's incentives today, isn't there? That's interesting. If the Premier's saying what you just said, maybe I'm not watching the same news, but there seems to be all these incredible incentives to build multi-res and to make things happen. Tell me, am I wrong?
There appears to be incentive out there, Scott. But in the last month, if you look at the building numbers in the province of Ontario, they've actually contracted compared to last year. And sitting on city council and sitting through community services meetings, the onerous task that a developer goes through trying to develop a subdivision, for example, is quite something.
Yeah.
So you've got to have that consultant there, highly paid consultant, basically plead your case with council. And then at the same time, and we've gone through probably 3 of those negotiated processes in the last 2 or 3 months, where the general public comes out and said, "No, I don't want that. I don't want that style of house in my neighborhood. How can you possibly build a house like that?" When what we're trying to do at the council level is incentivize the building community to build, but it's not happening.
And I've been involved with the project down at the waterfront, New Vision Park.
Yeah.
And being behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's incredibly difficult to build. And I'm not saying at the city level. It's like there's provincial regulations. There's 100 different things. You actually have to have basically all the money in the bank for this thing before it's even you put a shovel in the ground. So think about the cost of that. And then you have to, once you put the pricing out, you have to forecast years in advance what the pricing is. And then we were involved in this just before COVID. And when COVID came, it was like, that changed everything. How do you price a home 3 years in advance when you're like, going back to your original talk about nobody would get into that? Yeah, that's super difficult.
Yeah.
But I think there has to be innovative solutions. So let me come back around to something. What's Brent's last name? He's at the city.
Kalinowski.
How do I say it?
Kalinowski.
Awesome guy. I just met him recently. He lives near me. He has outdoor garden beds, and I knocked on his door. I didn't know who he was. Knocked on his door. I said, "Hey, I'd like to take some pictures of your garden beds. I'd like to make some, like vegetable garden."
I'm surprised he has time to garden. It must be his wife.
He has these great vegetable gardens, right? Yeah, he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
I had only met him recently, but I had heard he was brought in to work on this hub piece where you brought everybody together in a circle to deal with many of the challenges that are happening out in the streets today. Help me understand. I'm under the impression that this hub group couldn't afford to pay him a salary, and it dissolved. And everybody said this guy was unbelievable. He was great at what he was doing and bringing everybody together, trying to break those silos together. If you're finding solutions that is working, but somehow all of you as a group can't figure out how to make the solutions work with cash flow, tell me, like, come on, we got to figure out something. You can't keep doing the same things that you're doing. You have to find something innovative. This seemed innovative. Why did the whole hub idea sort of collapse? And am I wrong in my
Well, I don't
synopsis?
know whether it collapsed, Scott. My experience at DSSAB has been quite interesting when you're dealing with social services and those that deliver social services. So each one is watching the other. Who got money? How much money did they get? Mm-hmm. How come I didn't get that money, right? And there is that going on. And, I think probably over the last 3 years, there's been a tremendous amount of financial stress inside these organizations, no question about it, because of the inflationary process that's driven the cost of the wages, really, that are hurting those organizations. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't support them. I certainly do support them because a lot of them do great work. Mm-hmm. And we still have that hub in place right now. Actually, Lana Mitchell chairs that organization right now. And, the process of DSSAB was to throw ideas out to the hub and get feedback from them as to what that actually looks like and whether or not it makes sense. So the staff's job at that point is to put that forward at the board level to try and find avenues to move. We just announced last week secondary apartments, basically, in existing homes, $50,000 forgivable grant requiring 25% upfront from the owner. You tell me why the province hasn't done that or the federal government hasn't done that. I don't know why they haven't done that. But that process went through our board. It was delivered by staff. It made tons of sense. I've had numerous calls, and it's regional. I want to make that point absolutely certain so that people understand it's regional, because DSSAB is a regional organization that deals with the region. So yesterday morning, conversation with the mayor of South Algonquin. Mark, how can you help us make that? We have zero occupancy. There is no place for anyone to live. EMS people have to actually travel in there to work, and that's Whitney, South Algonquin.
Yeah.
So these are the problems that these small communities are facing. And quite frankly, in South Algonquin's case, they don't have the necessary bylaws in place. So DSAB will go in and help the CAO figure out how to put the right bylaw in place so that they can move forward with an opportunity to make that work.
Dave, can you bring us back around to the hub question again? Because I pushed it around a little bit here, and I want to make sure that we stay on that.
Well, what I've been keeping in mind as you've been discussing this part of the equation is that nobody wants to rent to in this particular environment with tenant-landlord situations to somebody that has mental health issues and addictions. And how many of the people that we're talking about that are the problem for businesses downtown and the need for warming centers and low barrier shelters, which is the real kind of issue, right? How many of those people in that demographic, are we talking 100, 200?
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Because you and I always have opposing views, and I want you to speak on this. All day long, if I had a multi-res, all day long, I would want some of the clients of CMHA in there all day long. And the reason being is that if you have someone that's attached to services like CMHA and others, you have their supports. So if I have someone, I'm going to be guaranteed my rent's going to come every month. I don't have to chase it. I'm going to be, they have supports so that if anything goes sideways, there's people that can come in and look after the person in the residence. There's tons of supports that they have when they're linked to CMHA and DSAB. When they're not, if I'm just getting someone, I'll say wherever, I'll say a college student, they aren't linked to all those supports. So I'm on my own. So how we would differ, it's interesting you said that. I'm thinking I want someone from CMHA all day long, but I want to hear what Mark says.
Well, let me just sort of round out it. No problem, because I was trying to paint a picture. It might be perception and whatnot. I have seen some excellent journalistic looks at what happens when somebody takes a property, even in Ottawa, for example. There was a CBC piece where they took on people. They were told that the social services will support them. The landlord went forward with it, and it was nothing but a nightmare. So not all the good stories are out there, right? And I'm not sure about how it happens locally. But what I was trying to do is actually take a look at and maybe get a bit of a perception. I think we're missing institutional places for people to live, because a lot of these people, and I'm not sure about the percentage, can't function nor without a lot of support.
So are you saying that we should go to more of an institution-based society that we tried to get away from?
Yeah, I think it was a mistake. What they should have done was combined mental health institutions for those who really can't function in society, make them better and not as nightmarish as the old psych hospitals might have been. We need a larger jail situation, penitentiary, where people who need that to be taken out of society, to eliminate them from and help them go through the transitions. And the other end of what I would say would be the dream sort of institution is you got mental health services, addiction services. You have people that need to be locked up until you can get them settled down. And then you have the transitionary system where you can help them with supports out and reintegrate and to establish themselves. So we don't have that. We have a cramped jail. We have a hospital that doesn't have enough, can't support them there. They're on the streets and just trying to survive. They're directly exposed to drug dealers who want to keep them addicted. It's a mess, right? So what is the percentages of the ones, how many people in North Bay are salvageable? And how many need not community placement, but community supports just to survive? Like, not
So
everybody's a problem,
yeah,
and some people could be helped out of their problems in situations. And then there's a demographic of people that just can't afford the rent, and then that's why they some of them get into a place and stay and won't leave and don't pay their rent, and they're not necessarily dysfunctional or addicts. They're maybe just playing the system a little bit too. But I don't know.
So let me explain a learned circumstance that I went through this winter, actually. And first time it's happened, we had problems in Sturgeon Falls. Sturgeon Falls is part of our catchment area. And, there's a lot of discussion that went on with the CAO, the mayor up there. We have a representative, Jamie Restoul, on our board, who is just excellent to deal with. We had individuals that actually came from Quebec City and ended up camping in the snow dump that Sturgeon was going to use for the winter. Now we've got a big problem. They don't want to move. They know the system. They know that they're actually able to have supports in the community that they're in. And this creates a huge problem. So we'd never run into that before in Sturgeon Falls. It seemed to be somewhat balanced. So the end result was, after outreach, spent a fair bit of time speaking with those people, they agreed to go to a hotel. So they were housed in Cache Bay. I didn't see it, but the damage that was done to that particular hotel was apparently overboard. Where they smeared human feces on the walls, that sort of stuff. And quite frankly, Dave, I think those are probably the individuals, the folks that you're talking about, that you can't do anything with, given the system that we have now. I can't underestimate the support system that's going on in Northern Pines. And we've been able to get North Bay Regional Hospital and their ACT team on site 12 hours a day to provide those supports to people coming in that are in that situation. And I want to go back to that, your visual of the people that are actually visiting the low barrier shelter. And this is part of the problem that we face right now, is that transient traffic that's on Chippewa Street. And I can tell you, I've got the emails right now. I was reading all of them this morning, talking about parents dropping off kids at Chippewa. And it's a huge issue. And I'm quite frankly, at this point, I don't know what's going to happen this winter with respect to a warming center. I'll be very honest with you. And
so the Fraser Street one won't.
No, I have to be really careful here, Scott, because there's a bunch of negotiation going on at this point about what that actually looks like.
But it's not confirmed yet then.
No,
right?
It's not confirmed. But, I expect there may be some discussion after the June 4th council meeting about what that looks like. But I only relate back to Dennis Chippa and, his experience. And actually, he was citizen of and I was at that dinner not long ago, and it was interesting to listen to him.
Last Thursday, I think.
Yeah. Interesting to listen to him. He's quite the fella. It's very interesting, And we all have to realize that it's somebody that's on the street, right? And you have to have compassion. You've got to have some sort of compassion. But what really irks me in this situation that's developed around Northern Pines is individuals parents don't want to see those kids on the street because they feel that their children somehow are impacted. Obviously, they're impacted. There's no question they are. But the problem is not going away. As a matter of fact, I would suggest to you here and now that the problem will get worse without question. And, it's a heck of a situation. I know the mayor is trying to deal with it. Gary Gardner is trying to deal with it through the Community Safety and Wellness Committee, which will meet on the 5th. Trying to deal with these problems and what they look like are huge.
Founded in 1968, Voyager Aviation is a proud member of our community, providing worldwide aviation services from our headquarters right here in North Bay. If you're looking for a challenge, change, or want to expand your current career in aviation, Voyager is hiring for a wide range of technical and non-technical roles, including pilots, aircraft maintenance personnel, corporate administration, machinists, supply chain professionals, and more. Be part of a workforce that is over 400 strong, supporting humanitarian, government, defense, and civil aviation operations around the world. For a career in aviation and beyond, learn more about open positions and career paths at voyav.com.
The consultants report, its recommendation for a community hub closer to downtown.
Yeah.
Is that what you have going on Chippewa downtown instead of there?
Absolutely, without question. That's really what's happening.
And you said we've already put $13 million into.
Absolutely, we've spent a ton of money, provincial money.
And what you're saying is that you can't move it from there closer to downtown for the reasons of the consultants report because it impacts too many businesses and it's not the right thing.
You've got it, Dave.
So that's as simple as it is. Yeah. It's location.
Absolutely, without question. And
with the location at Chippewa is has its downside, but do you feel that it can be mitigated somehow? That this is the right place? Is that what your position is?
Well, from what I'm reading now, and trying to understand the board itself, all the board members that are city councillors here in North Bay are under pressure. They're under huge pressure. Because the community wants something done. And I understand that part. And
But there's a lot of things being done. Like the CMHA just reorganized and put itself in, was that the old Kresge building?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's still a lot of medical services that a lot of these people access that are downtown. That you can't move them anyways, right? Or can you?
And isn't officials pissed that CMHA is downtown in the old Kresge's building?
There's no question. No question. That's probably the best way to put it.
Okay, so now we're getting to the nut of it. We're getting to the nut of it.
Yeah, sure.
So it looks like we have, even despite all this effort and money and organization and trying to do things, we're disjointed in the effort.
Yeah, and that's why I said to you, David, in the beginning, we've got to be able to have the community support some direction because, my goodness, we don't want people on the street at 30 below this winter. That's the issue. And
how many people were accessing the warming center at those coldest times of this mild winter we just had?
Well, the proposal was for 40, and the numbers were in the hundreds. So
hundreds, 100, 200?
100. In talking 100.
100.
In talking to Dennis, they were overwhelmed by the number of people that actually
showed up,
used it.
Wait, is Dennis run the warming center?
He did the gathering place actually ran the warming center.
Can I? And I'm just going to put it out there. So I've heard we're in a small town, so you hear a lot of shit.
There's lots of stuff going on, Scott, lots.
I've heard from people within this sector that sometimes Dennis's numbers are a little bit, need to be looked at.
Exaggerated, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And I don't know if exaggerated low, exaggerated high, but his credibility. I'm not taking what he does and, the honors he's received, and he's a good guy. I've known him for many, many years, 30 years. But I've heard that his numbers are kind of skewed and doesn't have the full support of some of the other people in this sector.
But the 3-digit number that you're going by, is that from Dennis or from your own experience of checking into it?
That's from staff.
Okay, so that's a solid number.
It's a fair number.
Yeah. No, I know Dennis has his way of couching things but I don't think what is exaggerating is that it's really difficult for the gathering place to be doing all of that it needs to do, and perhaps there's another way to go about it instead of putting it on a charity organization.
Well, it was contractual, right? It was a contract that.
I know, and he's like sometimes waiting for the payments.
Yeah,
and it's it's tough on them.
They don't wait for the payment from DSSAB. DSSAB pays up front, right?
Okay. They security and everything like that too?
Well, what happened was when it became obvious that the numbers were unmanageable at that particular point, staff recommendation was we're going to have to put more money into it. So we had to put security cameras in the front of it. And we had to make sure that there was security on the street. And I would watch the security to make sure they weren't sitting in the building, they were on the street, because those business owners directly in that area were so impacted. And that gets back to my original statement about trying to understand the impact of what this is creating. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy.
I think everybody, probably people listening, everybody agrees with what you're saying, right? About the impact and what's happened, right?
Yeah.
You also, as a politician, you also have to deal with the NIMBY, not in my backyard issue. That's going to happen. It doesn't matter where you put the hub or the Northern Pines, wherever that happened to go, you're going to get it. But here's something, a study in the last year I read was about, and this was done in Ontario. And it started out, I was listening to the professors present it, and they were saying that there is and this was all communities in Ontario. They're saying, because I'd heard this about North Bay, that people are being bused with mental health issues to North Bay, or being bused to communities and being dropped off, and they're not going to get services. And I had heard that many times about North Bay. These professors who did this study, they started off their speech with that, and they were saying, seriously, and this was all social services people, we're all in social services. I don't think we have the coordination enough to actually coordinate, homeless people and people with addictions and bus them around Ontario and drop them off in communities. That's not happening. It's a fallacy. It's not happening. What the study indicated was that well more than 90% of all the people that we're seeing, homeless people, are from the community. So let's be, when we say we grew up here, you said you grew up here, I've been here for 30-something years. These are people in our community that are now homeless. I'll say, and I'm not going to talk about an individual basis, but we need to know, how did they get to that point? And where are the gaps that we're not providing as a society in our community? Where are they slipping through the gaps that gets to that point? Because we're talking about that point. We're talking about, warming shelters, Northern Pines. I'm not brilliant, but I would know, you put Northern Pines, there's Barclay House right there, the high school's right there, quiet community. Oh, we're going to hear some shit. Like, it's going to happen. Like, you saw it coming. So outside of that, going back, where is it? If 90% of all of these people are our community, where is the gaps that we're missing, that we're not supporting these people so that they get to that point?
Very good question, Scott. So, in the study actually that DSSAB did, that is part of the background that the Safety and Community Committee is actually dealing with right now, there were 131 touch points. In other words, services that are provided that somehow touch homelessness in the city. In the city.
131.
131. That was identified in our study. So the question, I honestly think the province needs to step in and say, this is how you'll operate social services. There will be only certain organizations that are capable of receiving the funding, because they all, as I said earlier on, scramble for that money, right? They're all looking for it because they need it operationally wise. And to your point, I sat in a very large meeting of all my counterparts in Northern Ontario, Northeastern Ontario, and I asked that specific question of the service manager in Sault Ste. Marie. Are you sending people to North Bay? Are you?
Yeah.
In front of everyone there.
Yeah.
And he said, absolutely not. He said, I was going to ask you that question. Are you sending people from North Bay to Sault Ste. Marie?
It's like, I don't know, say an old wives' tale or whatever. It's like when the professors were saying that it's not happening, but
No.
that's become the vernacular in many communities.
Well, I don't know. I was talking to a guy that used to be homeless, and he's straight in Arrow now. He does a lot of things downtown, knows a lot of people, knows some people, relatives that work in social services. And he said that COVID was an anomaly, but there was up to 200 people that came to the community because in other centers they needed to get them out because of North Bay. It looked like it had all the services necessary, and they weren't going to have it. So there might have been a real blip of people sent here during COVID.
So on that point, David, and Solicitor General, I brought that up at AMO meeting with the minister. I know for a fact that they were pushing people out of the North Bay jail, and those people were ending up in the low barrier shelter at Double Rinks. And they were pushing them out because of the circumstances. And I questioned, quite frankly, I think I maybe embarrassed her a little bit, questioned her about whether or not she knew that was going on in North Bay, because we couldn't handle the volume. It was too difficult to deal with. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, she'd never answered me on that question. But I could see her looking at her deputy, trying to figure out, is there any truth to that? But the pandemic played a really, really tough situation in this city. But Scott, you're absolutely right. I think when you look back at mental health and what's gone on in this, we were a regional center when we had the Ontario Hospital. Where did all those people go when they closed? And, I sat with, George Marousas was the chair of, and I really have a lot of respect for what George was able to do over the years. And he maintained the closure of that Ontario hospital was a major policy mistake at the provincial level. And we're reaping the benefit of what transpired, if you want to call it that. The inability to handle the social issues that are going on.
So not a benefit. The repercussions. The repercussions of I hear you. It's so I'm what I'm hearing here is like there's all these factors. You take the opioid crisis and you take all these factors into play. It's been the perfect storm for what's transpired, but there's still. Let me ask this question. When you're at a DSAB meeting, and so we're fine. We're the armchair quarterbacks that sit back and watching what's happening. How do you guys function knowing that this is every day? You look out the window, you could see what's happening. It must be so frustrating for staff. Must be so frustrating for the people on the front lines. They're doing everything they can. And the short time I've spent with people in social services, I don't think we pay them enough. They look like they've been weathered, man. Like, what a tough job. You do that day in and day out. What a grind. What a grind.
Yeah, you should have seen them after our last board meeting. It was 5 hours. We started at noon. We walked out of there at 5 o'clock at night. 5 hours of agenda process. A lot of discussion going on at that table. There's an agenda presented to try and get some business done. And in most cases, it works very well, but it's not unusual to go that long. And So I want to relate back to the pressure that councillors, City of North Bay councillors, are facing that are on that board, and they're exercising their voice at that through that process when we go through that, and it, as the chair, one thing I really try to do is to make sure all the voices at that table are heard. You may not like it, and there are times when I don't like it, but making sure that each one of those individual people have the opportunity to speak to their circumstance, and it makes a good functional board. We've been I think we've done a lot of good things. We have a new CAO, Melanie Shea, who is just, boy, she is something else.
It's good, eh?
I can't believe the energy she has, and she's doing everything. And she apologized to me at the last meeting because we couldn't get a resolution on an issue. And I told her, I said, make sure you go back to the staff and tell them that they did the best they could. There was really no answer there, and we'll have to go back at it and try and find an answer. But
So
they work hard.
Do you feel it's a policy? At the end of the day, like at a DSAB meeting, my gut tells me, I don't know this answer, but my gut tells me it's not generally so much a money issue, but policy issues about how things could be better potentially. I think. Because the other part I'll just say is, and I understand about the money side of it, it's sort of like I'll use with the transformation of DSAB when they've taken the job creation piece out and they've moved it over to like Yes Employment and others and Stacey Fiddler. But then the government just comes in and is like, oh, since we take the job piece away, we're going to take $1 million or $2 million, whatever it is, out of DSAB. It's like, well, wait a second. Like, that's not the only thing they're doing. You're just like, you're starting to handcuff us now. We actually need that money to perform our essential services, but the government just comes in and I'm not saying they're bad. It's just, that's how it works. We're taking this piece away, so you don't need that money. And it's like, well, shit, we do. We can't get the stuff done.
So watch January this year is a transformation on Ontario Works.
Yeah.
It's substantial, and it's going to have a major impact, and we're trying to prepare for that issue coming up, and it will impact people without question. And anyways, I shouldn't go too far down that road. But
is it a policy thing? And the reason I say that is I had the opportunity to go to Sweden this year to watch hockey, and when I was there, I didn't see homelessness. And one of the things when I asked a couple of questions was, one of the policy differences that they have there is everybody has a right to accommodation, like a right to housing. It's a law. I don't know if it's better. Like, I'm only visiting for 10 days, right? So I don't know if it's better or worse, but it looks very different. It looks very different.
And I actually,
policy, right?
When you came back and you were telling that story, I remember looking and trying to search out what's going on there.
Yeah.
And apparently the city where the hockey was one of the best cities, and there was other cities that you would have saw the homeless there.
Okay.
Yeah. But and they have a system that helps. And Housing First is one of the things that people are talking about. And you're shaking your head.
Yeah. Why are you shaking your head?
I'm agreeing, Dave.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying no.
Yeah,
I'm just absolutely
shaking your head that we haven't done that.
And we've tried to structure DSAB. We do have some housing money sitting right now that we want to lever with actually developers and provincial federal government. Over the last couple of months, you probably watched it in the paper. The federal government and the province were fighting back and forth about funding envelopes, and there were a number of letters that were written saying, stop this. We don't need this going on at this particular point. The province and the federal government need to resolve their issues so that we can try and fix the problems that that are escalating in all these smaller communities. And it looks like they've finally come to some sort of rational deal, but there's a lot of headbutting going on. And that was very, very prevalent at the NOSDA level. Lots of pressure. I can tell you that there was a proposal that went to the provincial government asking the province to let the service delivery agents across Northern Ontario rewrite social policy in Northern Ontario. And that could happen. I thought
That's interesting.
I thought we would get kicked out of the meeting, but he listened. He actually listened. And actually, I'll be at NOSDA on the 25th of next month at our regional, and I'll have more information about whether or not the province has actually realized that policy should be done by the people that are actually delivering the service, that know what it takes to make it work. You can't do it in Toronto.
Okay, you've been a politician for some time. When do you start injecting common sense into these things? Like, come on, that's common sense, Mark, of course. Why doesn't that happen all the time? You're making it sound like it's revolutionary.
Well, it
Let's
is.
talk to the
I was
people.
really surprised about that. that process. I thought, holy mackerel!
They're going to listen to the people who deliver the services?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy town. Mark.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But to your point,
Yeah. I have hope when you.
we've got 10 people on council, right?
Yeah.
And they all voice their opinions, and they all vote a certain way depending on the circumstance and the pressure involved.
Mm-hmm.
And at times I try to sway individuals so you can see what's going on, but it doesn't always work. And that's the reality, I guess, of government. And it's not, you look at what's going on at the federal level, one just has to shake your head and say, are we really watching this happen?
Well, just to bring it all together and tie it up a little bit, because we've spent a lot of time and we've touched on a lot of important stuff. And I think it's the frustration of trying and sort of moving targets. And one of the things that needs to be done from my perspective, just talking and listening, is that you're going to have to find a place for a warming center that works and do it early in the year and make those decisions and just have a real good. The warming center is a big part of the puzzle for only a short part of the time of the year. Low barrier shelter, you got that. You got to find a way to mitigate it where it is. It doesn't look like you're going to be moving it anytime soon, despite the report that says that's the best way to go about things. What do you say that? Just to summarize where we're at and where you think things should be done in the next 8 months.
Well, there's no question. You're absolutely right on. We have no choice but to find a site, and I would probably phrase it as temporary. I think probably the hub may have some merit, depending on a couple of issues. One, obviously, the location and what that looks like. I will not support it anywhere near the downtown core, nor will I support it around a residential area, because I understand the pitfalls that are involved there.
What's left? Sorry.
Well, and that was my question, Scott. When we got the consultant's report, I said, we have Lake Nipissing on the west. What's left?
Yeah.
What's really left? And quite frankly, given the time factor to put a hub together, I would estimate that it would probably take 3 years to do it, to get it to the point where it actually functions. So the low barrier shelter in its present location will have to continue. But we still have phase 3 that's not totally open at this point and very, very close to being open, which actually will mean that the low barrier shelter was going to be used for overflow, because the hotel costs are extreme, and we needed that extra space to take that overflow. I could support, and I want to go on record saying this. I certainly understand the communication that most of our board members receive from the general public with respect to the transient traffic on Chippewa. I don't like it either. I don't like it. And I could certainly, if we had a viable financial process that would see the low barrier shelter moved from there, I could support that. But it's got to be viable. And the other part of this whole scenario really is the money. Where does the money come from? And would the province actually support something like that? We cannot go back and levy the property taxpayer in this city. And we have the power to do that. We can go to city council and say, look, we require X number of dollars to operate. We're going to levy you, and you shall pay. That's the way it works. I won't support that.
That was the vision of the province when they downloaded the mental health onto the community, by the way.
Yeah, well, you can see what's happened here, right?
It didn't work very well.
And, I stood on the stage in Thunder Bay, and I told all of the people that were there that city councillors in municipalities are frontline through this circumstance. And the province hasn't recognized the pressure that you face every day on the streets of North Bay or Sudbury or Timmins. I mean, I sit with the mayor of Timmins. I mean, she really had a tough go trying to deal with these circumstances when we didn't create them. They weren't created by the municipality. They've been created by upper levels of government, and the responsibility lies with them, period. But it's not, they've walked away from it, right? And they've done a good job at it. Real good job at it.
I like this ending. Right? You did capture exactly a major part of the issue here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
I still want to see you debate Dave Menzicino someday, though.
I'm not interested in doing that, Dave.
Who do you miss that you worked with on council? Who do you miss that's not there? Well, we miss the wrench.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I sat right across from George, and I'd see something coming up, and I'd watch his eyes. I always look for the body. And he'd come out with something I hadn't thought of, and I thought, holy mackerel. And my dad he would always talk about George,
Yeah, your dad would have been on council with George,
yeah, he'd talk. He'd say, I went to George, and I've asked him for support on this particular thing. And then he'd come home at night, and he'd say, the son of... I'm not going to use that language. Changed his mind and went the other way, and he would be so angry. But that's the difficulty you faced on city council. It's not easy.
No,
very difficult.
Well, I'm glad you run. I'm glad anybody puts themselves out for public service because. And who was it? I was reading something recently, like the abuse counselors take. This is all across the board now. I'm trying to think where I read it or heard it. It was something. It's incredible, the abuse, like with social media and all these different things. All politicians now are just taking a beating. Right?
So to that point, Scott, and I'm not adverse to sharing this. I was threatened about 2 weeks ago. Pretty
like
fair.
Seriously?
Oh yeah, seriously.
Over what, Mark?
Oh, well, suggesting that I'm the one that's reducing the funding envelope to those that are homeless because of,
Wow.
So there was police report.
Was it through social media or did someone come up to you right into your grill?
No, phone messages were left.
Wow.
Obviously, I had the phone number and everything.
Yeah.
And, we were able to trace that individual back to DSSAB report. So,
So was it, just to be clear, was it a community member or was it a player in the bureaucracy or was it a politician? Like, was this person just...
it was a client, basically a client at DSSAB, yeah. So, and you can understand the frustration they face. Quite frankly, I am quite front and center in the community talking about all these things.
You're the chair.
And a target and not a nice place to be. My wife said to me when I was leaving today, she said, boy, I'll be glad when these 2 years are over, because you...
and Jocelyn's been with you a long time, man. She's seen lots.
Yeah, she's seen lots, yeah.
So I can't imagine the pressure.
Yeah.
Mark, thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for doing this, Scott and Dave. But the importance of media can't be underestimated at this point. And being able to, explain to the public to a certain point what's going on and trying to be open, I feel for those parents that have kids at Chippewa. I do. There's no question. I recognize that. But we're in a really tough spot right now, and cooperation and understanding, and we'll get to the right place, I hope.
Well, there's been a lot of progress in the last few years, and part of that is through the hard work of people like yourself. And I appreciate you seeing the value in the media covering these things. I know sometimes you end up with pieces of flesh and sometimes your own on you by the efforts, but you still come back and you're willing to do this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for viewing. Appreciate that. Please like, subscribe, and share our stories. That's how we generate better numbers, so we get sponsorships that support this type of local journalism. You've been listening to another Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Scott Clark.
And I'm Dave Dale. Thank you.